Imagine surrounding yourself with incredible women who've overcome challenges, they've rebounded after failures and disappointments, and women who are not afraid to shine their brilliance to make a mark in the world. These women support other like-minded women because they know there is plenty of opportunity for everyone and that together we really can make a difference, grow our businesses while have fun along the way. This is what Women in Leadership Podcast is all about. Welcome. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Grab a cup of your favourite beverage, pull up a chair, and let's get this conversation started. And welcome to another episode. Joining me on today's show is Kristina Lucia. Kristina, she is an award-winning and best-selling author. She's a creator. She is an artist who ignites the imaginations of children and parents through her limited edition animals and touching storybooks. Now, on today's show, she's got such a wonderful, diverse story to share. She's going to wrap it up in these teachings. She's going to talk about why communication and emotional awareness are essential skills, how to develop them. She's going to talk about how to build a business with creative marketing and meaningful connections. So I know many of you who are listening are in your own business, so you will want to grab a pen and paper because she's got some incredible ideas that she's used and that she's going to be sharing today. She's also going to talk about how transforming trauma into a positive journey can lead to both personal and professional growth. So welcome to the show, Kristina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. As I mentioned, you've got such an incredible story, and I know the insights, the hindsight, of course, the foresights that you're going to share in today's episode is certainly going to support people who may have found themselves or similar story to you. But as we mentioned, one of the key points is how do you take that trauma and develop it into a positive journey that can lead to both professional and personal growth, which of course is what you've done. And of course, what has led to the wonderful creative projects that you get to share and work on every single day and share with children and parents. But first, let's talk about communication and emotional awareness. Why do you say that these are essential skills?
Communication is so important because it's not only how we talk to each other verbally, it's also how we relate, physical boundaries, etc. How we not only express our feelings, but how we handle our feelings. And the more awareness we have of how people communicate and how we communicate it and and being able to set those boundaries and that awareness, we actually are able to grow deeper relationships and have more fulfilling lives. In my healing journey, in addition to being Catholic, I've been born and raised Catholic. I've been Catholic my entire life, but I really love serenity prayer because it falls so nicely, it aligns very nicely with Christianity. And the thing with, I'm personally Catholic, but in general, Catholicism, Christianity in general, it does promote choice and responsibility. And that really is what serenity prayer does, is that we have a choice to feel the way we feel, but we also have a responsibility to carry through those choices and take ownership for those feelings. And yes, there's not a solid right or wrong, but there's always a solid choice and responsibility. And when we're aware of that, when we're aware that we always have a choice, when we're aware we always have a responsibility, we are opened up. Like, for example, like sometimes, like, because I'm in a big city, so I'm always on the subways or a bus. If someone, like, for example, getting onto a subway car that smells or a metro car that smells, yes, it's unpleasant, but we have the choice to step off the car and go to the next car. You know, we have these choices. We have these choices to change our route. And I realize it's a very basic example, but when you realize you have a choice on the smaller everyday level, it does ripple into the bigger projection of things. Like, a lot of people, when they hear I'm an entrepreneur, the first thing they say is, I don't have time for that. I always want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have time. It's a choice to say, I don't have time. It's a choice. Yeah, exactly. And when you realize
it's talk about a little bit deeper into that, because what you've just said is so important, that, once you are aware of those things, you can be more intentional. And with the
Yes.
more intention, you've got a choice to act in a certain way. So when it comes to communication, I mean, everybody has different communication styles. We may say something, and yet when it lands on the other person, their perception of it may be completely different in the way in which you wanted to express it. And I think we see that happening more and more. I mean, just to give you an example, I love watching and observing people's conversations, and I'm thinking sometimes some conversations, you're actually talking about the same thing, yet you're coming at it from different angles, but you don't see that. And so it becomes this, and then, well, you're offended. You know what? We can still agree to disagree, or not agree with someone, and not have to have it be taken as an offense. You know what I mean? Just because someone doesn't agree with you and come back doesn't mean. So let's talk about that. So how did you start to even open yourself up to becoming aware, being, what am I trying to say? That you wanted to become more aware of it, because I think it has to start with you first, because often we want other people to change, but it starts with you. So let's dive in from here.
Absolutely. So I had a moment with one of my parents in my early 30s, and it was a bottom moment. I got into a very big fight with my mother, and my mother said something extremely hurtful to me. And some other things also happened around that day. And I remember getting off the phone and thinking, I need to change. And I saw a therapist and started working with my therapist. And the first thing she did was she gave me a feelings list. And you might as well have given me a list in a different language. I had no idea what it was. And as we started breaking down different traumas and things that had built upon me, I realized there was a lack of communication in my family dynamic. And I also realized that I was coined as a scapegoat, and why I was being coined as a scapegoat. There is a saying that most people who have been in therapy or on a healing journey have heard a dozen times, where someone says to you, your parents are doing the best at what they have. And it did trigger me for a very long time. It upset me for a very long time. And my mom did pass in 2019. And unfortunately, she and I didn't get to go through all of the things, because she made choices that she didn't want to go on a healing journey. And with my healing journey, I will say that I learned, there were things I learned where I was able to communicate with her, but honestly, it actually was probably causing a bigger rift in us, because I was healing and she was going the opposite direction. And as her daughter, that's the hardest thing that I live with, is respecting her choices. Because I would have liked her to have joined me on the journey. I would have liked to have had a better opportunity. And I realize the woman in heaven is the woman I want here right now. But I do know she's safe. I know she's okay. And I do take a lot of joy and comfort in that. Although I will be honest, when I have my hard moments, that's what I struggle with. And my inner voice goes, stop. She made those choices. She was dealing with her own demons. And when I realized, though, that I can change, and even seeing our rifts, I found even when we were having our rifts, I learned quickly after a couple of years of therapy that, like, the way I'm talking right now in a calm voice because I'm very dramatic, I'm very high energy. And like when I'm out and about, like I get really excited. And when I work with kids, I've found and I've been babysitting and taking care of children my entire life. So it's really not a stretch, but I learned when I'm calm and when I cool my energy. And people have actually, it's funny because my mom always said I was super hyper, but everyone else says you have really calming energy, you have a really good voice and all this other stuff. And that was also a big part of my healing journey. My mom told me I had no sense of direction. She told me I get anxious. She told me I had a horrible voice, but everyone's like, you have a good voice. You don't get anxious. You just need a minute to figure things out. And you do. Like, you're the leader of our group. And also you went from a small farm town to living in New York City. It's like you really don't get anxious, you figure things out. And so realizing that with my mom, even though we still had our rifts, when I have heart to hearts with other, not just family members, but friends, I find when I'm calm, I have better conversations. But on the flip side, if I'm having days where I'm sad about my mother, or early or late last year, I was going through a breakup, I wasn't feeling myself, I did stay away from people because I knew I wasn't in a space where I could tolerate a moment of being told what to do, or I could tolerate a moment of my feelings being discounted. So
Mm-hmm.
I chose to stay away from people. And it's funny because when I told my friends this, a couple of them said to me, "Oh, but you should come around." I said, "This is exactly why I wasn't around, because I knew people would tell me, oh, get over it, or they give me opinions. And I know they meant it from the best place possible. I'm not saying they were doing it maliciously, because they were not doing it maliciously. It was coming from the best place possible. And that's also part of being aware of your feelings, is knowing when you need a break. I have another family member who has never been a good communicator, still is not a good communicator. I know to limit my time with them.
Yeah.
And when I'm around them, I make sure I get there late, I leave early, I make sure I have an activity. On the flip side too, I have other people in my life where I become aware that they don't like a lot of stimulation.
Mm.
So if I want to spend time with them, I try to make an effort to talk to them in advance and ask to spend time when it's not a holiday, looped in
Mm.
to spending time with them, so there's less stress. And
Yes.
that's it is a lot of work. I'm not lying. It is a lot of work. I'm not going to say it's easy, but the flip side of it is also being aware of what you need. And that's where, like, I space myself. Like, there are times where I plan things out, where I know I have certain friends where I do have one friend I was with over the holiday season where I can just be myself with her and her family. And
Mm.
so I did spend more time out there, and I was like, because I knew I could be myself. Like, I knew if I was tired and I needed to go in the spare bedroom and lie down, I knew it wouldn't be a problem.
Mm.
Whereas, like, for example, with my mom, it would be like, what do you mean you don't want to spend every waking moment with us? Like, what do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. And like, so with people like that, I've learned to limit my time if they
Yeah.
want me to be at their beck and call. And that's what I always talk about, is that we're all human and we all need a break, and the more we learn to be respectful, and honestly, there are going to be people that aren't going to get it. And that's
Yes.
where we have to set
And
boundaries
that's
with
all
those
right, as you
people.
say. So have you always been aware of those things that you needed, that time out, that space, to allow yourself even just to sit in your own thoughts? Because sometimes when you've done that and your energy starts to recoup, you're able to respond better, because not everything is going to be something that you feel like you have to handle. It's just, some things just flow over. Did you always have that awareness, or did you gain that awareness through working with someone who was able to point that out? So what works for you in that situation? Was it something that you always knew, or something that you got more familiar with? This is what I need.
I actually was always aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I think that's part of the reason my mom had so many rifts, because I always had this heightened awareness. What being in therapy taught me is to follow through on that awareness.
And that's all right. There's nothing wrong with
It's all
you.
right.
Because this is what I wanted to follow through with, is so often we live and make choices on other people's expectations of
Mhm,
us, rather
mhm.
than what we know that we need. And
Yes.
so there comes a time where, as you, I think you've done so well and modeled that to us, is that okay, if your mother or someone says, why do you need time on your own? You should be with the family, because they're probably extroverts and don't realize that as introverts, we need time on our own. We would wear ourselves out if we were peopling, I've so always say I've got that amount of peopling in me each day. And once that's empty, that's it. I can't even say yes or no. It's like a thumbs down, thumbs up for yes or no. But it's okay if they don't understand that. I don't have to convince you or whatever. But a lot of times we don't get to that stage. We're always on all the time because we don't want to let anyone else down, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's actually something that I dealt with in therapy, is people pleasing,
Yeah.
because you get so used, because I was a scapegoat. I was always the bad one. And I am overly extroverted, and I'm actually from a family of to a certain degree, most of them are more introverted. They're more private. In generally speaking, I'm not speaking about everyone individually, but in general, most of my parents are, my mom is extroverted, but I could tell she needed a breather. Whereas I'm overly extroverted. And that was also a clash to a certain degree. And to survive, I became a people pleaser because it was drilled in me that I was always the problem and I was always the issue. And I realized, no, I'm not the issue. No, I'm not the problem. Like, I don't have to do everything when people say. And there were other things that were stemmed from the trauma, because some of my strengths were translated to me as disabilities, meaning like I'm overly sensitive. And my mom actually diagnosed me with self-esteem issues, said you have low self-esteem. And when I say I'm overly sensitive, my love language is words of affirmation. And my mom was unfortunately, struggled with understanding things that weren't exactly in her hindsight. Like, she was a gifter in acts of service. And she liked to be loved through words of affirmation, but she couldn't understand why I liked to be loved through words of affirmation. It was there was some disconnects there. And so that was communicated towards me, that you have low self-esteem. And when I say I'm overly sensitive, the reason why it's not meaning that I cry on a moment's notice, it's oversensitivity means like a high level of awareness. It also comes with a responsibility that needs to be nurtured. And that's what like my editor actually has taught me. I have this amazing editor, and she explained to me, you're a capital W writer, meaning you're a writer that translates things. And I always hesitate saying that one-on-one, because people hear capital W, like, I want to be a 2, I want to be a capital W. And I'm like, you understand, it comes with a lot of responsibility. It's like, it is more difficult. I mean, yes, I'm very social, but like when it comes to really deep friendships, like working relationships, like I do have to be more choosy, because when you are overly creative, when you are a capital W or a capital A artist, like it does come with responsibilities like anything else in life. And that, and you need to respect that, and also respect you're doing this for a reason. But
I smile when you said that, because a few people that are quite close to me have often been told that too. You're very emotional or highly sensitive. And it's kind of like, actually, no, I have zero tolerance for BS. You know what I mean? I'm not putting up with it. So it's not on me, but you know what I mean? It's so true. Anyway, look, thank you so much for sharing that and spending time on that, because I think in today's world, I mean, with people saying something and, I'm offended, and can we not just talk around it and get to around a table and put all of that aside and then say, well, what's the higher purpose for this? What do we both want? And you realize you actually both want the same thing, and we may have different steps and different ways of getting to that. And you know what? It's okay. I mean, if we were all the same, wouldn't life be so boring? I mean, seriously. So anyway, I think that is, and it really, I think, beautifully lays a foundation to then let's segue into building a business with creative marketing and meaningful connections. But before we do that, you are able to transform your trauma into a positive journey and become an entrepreneur. So share a little bit about what you do, how that's come about, and then, of course, we can talk about some of the creative ways to market. But share how that traumatic journey and your journey of healing then segued into you starting your business.
Absolutely. So when I started working with my therapist and started working through these various traumas and realizations, the scary part, and I think I will be honest, and I want to be sensitive towards people on their own journeys. You almost take comfort. It's very easy to take comfort in the victim role. It's comfortable to say, well, I'm bullied, I have an excuse, and making the choice not to use my past life as an excuse. Other things started to unravel. I realized, because I had grown up walking on eggshells, I found my way into jobs where I was walking on eggshells, and I was actually in jobs that I didn't belong in. But because of my intelligence and because of my sensitivity, I was able to pick things up on my own. Like a simple example I can give is a lot of people think I learned how to cook and bake from my relatives and from my mom, and I didn't. I actually learned from observing and figuring it out on my own. I would actually get in trouble if I didn't do it right. And I would be told, come on, you've seen me do this a million times. How can you not be paying attention? So no one ever held my hand and taught me. I watched my mother fold eggs into a batter once, and that's how I learned how to fold eggs. There was no like talking me through it. I watched her do it once. And anyone out there who bakes knows like folding eggs into a batter is not easy, but I watched it once and learned. That's how I learned how to knead dough. I watched my mom do it, and then I just started doing it myself. I got no guidance, no corrections. It was just like figure it out. So that's how I landed in these jobs where, again, I was working for higher level men in higher levels. They were all heads of their department or they were managing directors. I worked on Wall Street for 9 years. So I'm working with people that are not going to hold your hand, figure it out. And so I was used to that. And so when I started healing the traumas, I realized, oh, geez, I don't belong in here. And people, and I think and I really believe as I started was going through this transformation, people did notice it, because I actually had a good friend of mine who actually texted me last night, with a video of his daughter with one of my crocheted stuffies I made for her. He was actually one of the ones that came to me and was like, you got to do something. You're not in the right spot. And ironically, that was like right when I started making my pivot. And so when I started my pivot, it was ironic because a year later, I got laid off from my job, and it was really scary because obviously the dream is that you go through your pivot and you land to another job and you have this like uncertain in between. And when I got laid off, my first reaction was, and this is also part of like the healing journey, is even if you're not necessarily a certain religion, like it's always your first step is believing in your higher power. Now, as a Catholic, I'm like, of course there's a higher power. Of course there's a God. So that's where I have to be patient with people, because faith does come to me very naturally. So step 1 of 12 steps is like, got this, moving on next. And I thought, no, this is God. God's listening to you. He knows you're on the pivot. He knows what's ahead of your journey. Like he knows, he's listening to you. And so I wasn't nervous. I trusted that moment. And while I was like figuring things out, a friend at the time saw my crochet work and she said, there's a business here. And so I ran with it and I set up a presentation for her. We switched my website. So I still have this idea. I was still going to go into another job and then develop this on the side. So fast forward to that fall, I went to this interview, and ultimate networking story. It was on Park Avenue. If anyone listening has seen Baby Boom, this was like one door over from the office building that Baby Boom's filmed in. So right by Grand Central. I mean, think of the most fabulous like block of New York. That's where I was interviewing, right? Beautiful office, go in, the interview goes great. Walk out of my heels, and I thought, I can't do this again. Because if I take this job, I'm going to repeat my process. That's a big part of your healing journey, is stopping, hitting pause and saying, wait, I need to undo my steps. I need to undo my habits. And I remember going to my career coach, Matilda, in a WeWork conference room and talking it out. And I literally looked at my lap and looked at my hands and looked back up at her and said, I think I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur. And she said, I agree. And I'm a huge Robert Redford fan. And if anyone has seen The Candidate, at the very end, when they're in the hotel room and Robert Redford's character says, what's next? That's really how it felt. Because when you just, when you declare yourself an entrepreneur, there's always that, please excuse my language, that, beat moment where you're just like, what do I do next?
What?
Or as Brene Brown would say, effing first time. Like it's like all those things together. And and it was ironic because, not ironic, I should say, it was kind of awful, but so we started talking about it and she said, okay, you have these ideas, let's like pursue that. And I started pitching both those ideas, this one idea and the idea of the stuffies, and me telling stories through these stuffies that I created, and people got gravitating towards it. And then a couple of days later, seeing that people were gravitating towards this, a couple of times people were gravitating towards, so that I need to focus on this lane, the stuffies, forget the other idea I had. And I got a call from one of my siblings saying, please call dad. Mom's still in the hospital. My mom told me she was in the hospital for pneumonia. And I called my father, and he was a little flustered. And he said, yeah, they're doing more tests on mom. They detected some cancer cells. And I swear it was my grandma. That's why I'm a Lucia. I'm named after my grandmother. I got this urge, and I went online and filed for my LLC that night. Fast forward later that week, I found out my mom was stage 4 lung cancer. And a week later, we lost her. And the day she passed, when I finally got home to my house, because I was back and forth between New York and Massachusetts, and I was staying with a friend because my friend at the time insisted you shouldn't be alone, which was right. I was grateful she told me to stay with her. When I finally got home that day, I opened up my mailbox and I got my first piece of mail addressed to my LLC. And I knew it was my mom and grandma. I knew they were telling me, I knew they were telling me, you need to do this. Like, you just need to follow this path. And there's no doubt in my mind, because my mom passed away early that morning and I got this mid-afternoon. I know my grandma hugged my mom and said, Linda, she's going to know. She's going to know what to do. And I kept pursuing it. And everyone told me I was crazy, which is typical as an entrepreneur. Everyone told me, how are you going to produce all of this? What if you try getting someone to hand make it? Are you going to, what about the cost? All these different things. I kept saying, no. The characters are going to lead me to an answer. And I've been saying for years, I wanted a blog. And so when the pandemic hit and we were all on shutdown, I thought, what do I have to lose? And so I had just published my first blog a month earlier because I'm a February baby. And so I thought it'll be nice, like my birthday month. And so when the pandemic hit, I sat down and wrote a blog a day. And probably 90% of those blogs actually never got posted because I kept writing more and more blogs and then posting other things. And what the blogging did is, I was always very disciplined and consistent as an artist, as a dancer. But what that did is it solidified my writing. It gave me, because I've been writing for years in my jobs, like in all my degrees, because like, even though I've been in creative degrees, you do write, you do analyze things a lot. And it gave me an opportunity to write my own voice, not analyzing a play or writing through my boss's words, or it gave me an opportunity to be me. And by the end of that year, I realized I needed to write my children's series. And so that's like the biggest thing I always share with people is, if you want to make a pivot, the first step, I really believe, is setting a period of time where you develop that habit.
Yeah.
And just give yourself that time to do it over and over again. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 3 months, and you might throw it out the window. I've done that too. Like, there are things I've done as an entrepreneur where I'm like, okay, that didn't work. Like, let's take a break next, and I think that's the biggest thing as an entrepreneur is there isn't a rigid line of what works and what doesn't work. It's really about listening to the why and how and adapting it to your voice. And, I realized eventually as the brand solidifies, yes, you have a solid, like, this is, because even as an entrepreneur, like, I do have solidified things that are hard no's for me or are definite yeses for me. But you do that so you can experiment with different things. And so that's like
and often, and having faith too, and I certainly believe this as a Christian too, is that in that period, you gave an example of writing that blog, you were developing that skill, but the Lord will often guide you through that to the next stage. And had you not done that, you wouldn't have had time for those characters to start to really form for you. And often you look back and you're able to put the pieces together, aren't you? To okay, so then that's become a book. Then, so now, if I'm assumed correctly, you've got these beautiful, what you call stuffies, which you crochet yourself.
Yeah.
And then there's storylines about those characters, or are the characters in your book separate to the stuffies?
So it's ironic. So the stuffies still exist. Like, I still have them on my website, but everyone kept gravitating towards the boy elephant. And so when I originally started writing my book series, I wrote 10 books in a week. Again, and only one of them is going to be published. The rest of them either have been rewritten or they're still like in the development draft folder. And when my original idea for my series is there will be 4 main characters, because I really thought the first stuffy I ever created was for my friend's little girl, and it was a gift for her becoming a big sister. And I call it the Lucy Bear. So my grandma was a Lucia, but everyone knew her as Lucy. And she was very much like me. She was very charismatic and loved being the center of attention. So I say this is genetic, my energy. Like my grandma was the same way, if not more. And I thought that would be it. And then the one of those books that I wrote that actually is going to be book 15 of the series, it became the first book I illustrated. So it was supposed to be in a different order, but then I chose to reorder things so I could focus on the marketing. And so I felt like, you know what, it makes sense to have this be the 15th book of this section of the series, because it's the first book I wrote, but also it was the book where I took ownership of Bella Elephant being the main character. And originally the name, I thought I thought of it because of my friend's little girl, because I had made her a girl elephant lovey. And then I realized as I was writing, and Bella had been my nickname for ages. It still is my nickname. But again, because I, again, working through my traumas, I realized, no, you need to be your true self. You're writing about yourself and mom. Like this is a second chance for mom to be the everything she was and more to you. And also I was writing kind of Bella is like an autobiography to a certain degree of myself, and obviously I've written in a way it's relatable, of course, but Bella is my nickname. And elephants, I swear to God, are my spirit animal. Like I have a memory like an elephant. I think they're amazing animals. Also the market, the baby market, the children's market, elephants are a very big character. So that was a big deal for me, owning my true self. And it also felt right doing that because the mission of my series is improving communication through the recognition and identification not only of our own feelings, but the feelings of others. And there are different ways I talk about that. And one of the ways is being your true self, owning your feelings, like taking responsibility for your feelings. And so that was a big moment for me to be able to say Bella is a child version of me. Bella is my nickname. And the other big thing too about my series is that as an artist, I do illustrate my series. I do create all the coloring printables. And I can't tell you how many times growing up, even though I started formally drawing at 7 years old, most people did not know I was an artist. Yeah. There was one time where I gifted one of my pieces to a cousin and his then fiance. And the fiance actually turned to me and said, I didn't know you draw. I thought it was just your sibling that drew. And it really hurt. It really hurt. So that was a big thing for me. And even before my first book came out, I can't tell you how many times people questioned my artistic skills. Even though I've been drawing formally since I was 7 years old, I have multiple degrees in art, and people were still saying to me, are you capable of drawing? Are you capable of this? Are you okay with this? And meanwhile, I have this huge, expensive art portfolio. Meanwhile, my writing portfolio for me solo is like probably a lot smaller because like all my writing has been based on coursework or is based on, corporate jobs I've had. So it would be hard for me to pull it together. Meanwhile, my art portfolio starts from 7 years old till present day and includes all these different genres.
Themes.
Yeah,
I love that. And so that you're able to really express yourself creatively in writing and your art. It's a beautiful, beautiful blend. So let's talk about some of the creative marketing and meaningful connections that you've done. I know that we're well over the 30 minutes mark, but we promised to share some of those. So what are some of those tips that you can share about creative marketing?
Oh, absolutely. So as an author, there's a lot of standard marketing out there. People will tell you, you have to get into schools, you have to get into bookstores, et cetera, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, I am working on getting into those venues, but seeing how congested it is and how complicated it is, It's given, I personally look at the market and I'm like, where are people not going? So I talk a lot about coloring because, again, when I was saying about feelings and identifying ours and recognizing them in others, when you're talking about this, you have to give people action points, and how we can work on these skills is through low stimulation activities, and coloring is a perfect low stimulation activity. And so I always create a lot of principles, and I actually have one for your audience, which I will be sharing with you guys as well. Love to share that. And so thinking of that, okay, where do people color? And so that's where I developed a strategy of approaching restaurants and saying, I would love to create a custom coloring printable for you, or a placemat. So there are restaurants I work with that, and I'm working on expanding that, because not a lot of artists and authors necessarily approaching them. When I go to another example of creative marketing that I do is, actually, I should mention this, it's not so much creative marketing, but it's a strategy I've developed. I make it a point every day to go onto Instagram. Personally, I focus on Instagram and interact with people. And yes, over time, I've developed a list, and I get the lists are hard, and I get it can be draining. But once you develop that list and you start looking at the accounts that do interact with you, or you find are on that plane, and going through their comments and getting into their community, that's like a really big step I found that really worked. And then the other piece of it, which comes into the daily interactions, is observing people. What are they posting about? Are these my people? And some questions, some things I personally look for. And I am working on setting up questions, so that if someone asks me, like an elevator pitch, like what would I tell them to do? So for example, I've learned to focus on people that create low stimulation activities, because that's a big part of my message and my brand. So that's what I look for. And then from there, I look at, okay, what are they doing for low stimulation activities? Are they coloring? Are they doing crafts? The other big thing I look for too, especially around the holidays, is what are they buying? What are they gifting? So this is actually a project that I'm working on now, and I hope I'm able to come back in a year and say, I'm doing this now. I actually am actively reaching out to clothing brands and asking them to collaborate with me. And the manifestation I'm doing is to pair my book to be paired with clothing items, whether it's dresses or pajamas or whatnot, because a lot of parents, for my market research, I saw parents bundling books with pajamas, and I was like, I need to hop on this, because I'm not seeing authors directly connected with this. The other piece of that is the licensing. And I'm actually doing I'm actually working with a lawyer now and all of that. So I'm in that process of I'm already trademarked, but I'm in the process of a new trademark and copyright and all that jazz. But that's my other manifestation goal, is I'll be able to license my art to be printed on clothes.
Yes.
So I realized I wish I had I always am thinking of how to say this more concretely, but the biggest thing that I see is that we need to identify where our product or where our service fits in the chain of that business. So as an author, books are a foundation. And when you realize that the book is the foundation, and I'm going to talk money for a second. I don't like to talk money, but I feel like it's necessary to say what I'm trying to say. As an author, you don't make money on the sale of your books. You make money on the products that come from your books, on the copyrights. So for example, in the children's sector, that could be anything from the stuffies and closed animation, or your memoir, or your nonfiction. That could be a Reese Witherspoon buying your rights to turn it into a movie, on and on and on. And so that's the way I feel. That's our first step, is identifying, okay, where do we fall into it? Our other piece of it, especially if you draw, and even if you write, I feel the same way. We're problem solvers. And I say we're problem solvers because we can create solutions. How I sold my first placemat is I got the owner of the restaurant talking. And he said to me, tomorrow is my work anniversary, and I had no time to create a banner. Guess how many years I've been in business? I said, 25, 32 years, 46 years. And he said, I didn't even do a banner or anything. So I raced home, because I always have tons of coloring drawings on file for my coloring books and printables and all this stuff. I pulled a picture of Bella Elephant eating pasta, and I went, "Buon anniversary, Don Filippiano, mangia mangia, love always, Bella Lucia." And that got me the meeting, and that got me the sale on my first placemat. But I identified, I got him talking, saw his problem, and I was able to create this solution.
Yeah.
And because when I approach a brand, like when I work trade shows, that's the first thing I say is, would your brand be interested in this? When I approach a restaurant, would your space be interested in this? And because at the end of the day, it's like serenity prayer. You're not going to change them. You have to figure out what they want. What are they looking for? And what do they want? Because I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs outside of the book industry. And I was just talking with this one lady, and she has a beautiful product. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. But I was listening to her talk, and, it was coffee. And I also have learned too, as an entrepreneur, my guidance is valuable. I'm not giving my information away for free. Like I'm not giving business advice without like a solid consultation and whatnot. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, well, where's the market research? Do people really want this? Because sometimes you have these great ideas.
Yeah.
And that's how I, even as an entrepreneur myself, like I approach that. Like, do I want to go to more restaurants? Absolutely. And, I'm always trying to figure that out. Do I want to get more schools? Absolutely. And, so I still am, I want to be as authentic as possible. Yes, I am still figuring things out, but I have learned part of it is identifying the problem and being creative about it.
And as you said, the beautiful example you gave with the restaurant, you used your idea, your IP, your creativity, saw a need, and innovatively created a solution from that. So I assume then from that he bought a license from you to be able to reprint that. Then the mat. How does that work?
Yeah. So what happened for that is I created a design just for him. So he gave me a flat fee. I am working with, so another thing I'm working on now. So again, like as a book author, people think I have to get into bookstores, which is true. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not true. It is, but the last thing bookstores want is another author. So I'm actually in a couple of conversations with women in the industry that create sensory bins, whether it's Play-Doh and the fillers or it's wooden inserts. And so this is something else that I feel like people will appreciate. So we are right now, these conversations are going that we're selling my book along a product that relates to my book. We're not using my actual designs yet because A, I still need to file the copywriting to protect myself. And B, when you copyright, you do get a cut. That's part of the reason why you copyright your music, obviously to protect your lyrics and protect your rights, but also that's how you make your money. You like Matthew McConaughey, we've all heard him say mailbox money. He gets paid every time someone watches the movie. Like that's part of the deal. But then again, it also comes with the promotion, which is what I would do too when people come. As I go into these deals, like I'm just as responsible for the marketing as the business using my copywriting, my art. So that's something I am working on. And the reason why, if someone's wondering, why don't you just jump into it now? The reason why I'm starting off slow is it is like dating. You want to get to know the people you're working with. And also, even if whenever I reach the copyright stage with a brand, I'm servicing them as much as they're servicing me. And I want to take it slow so I get to know them. This isn't just about, I as a Catholic, and because you're Christian too, like, the deadly sins, they're deadly because they force us to be internal, like they take away communication. So greed is one of the deadly sins. So if you think just about the money, just about how am I going to make it meets end, it's not going to grow because there are things that need to happen before those certain things come, and you want to build the system properly. So that's how I do it. How I protect myself when I sell a design to a restaurant is I am trademarked. I'm actually about to go through another trademark process. So I do ensure that, and I always disclose that to the space that I'm selling a design to. I say, I have my logo here. because it protects my art. And so that's how I handle that, and as I get bigger and as I grow into different bigger brands, I mean, I realize that conversation may change for restaurants, because right now I've been looking with more small local restaurants, which is great because I'm also learning, how does this work for me? Like, one of my buddies teased me because he knows I love to cook Italian because I'm from an Italian family. And he joked and said, what if you got into Olive Garden? Because he knows I would never eat at a chain Italian restaurant. I'm like, that would be a major account. You kidding me? But that deal would look very differently
Yeah.
than a deal with like the local New York restaurant. And that's something else like I can share too with your audience, like how, like the brands I'm talking with right now of us creating product collaborations, that I know that deal is going to look different from a deal with a bigger clothing brand that has like a more set machine structure that
Yeah.
works and I'm coming into. And that's some reason why also I am working with a lawyer, because we are working that out. Like, okay, how do you work with the bigger brand? How do you work with a smaller brand? And because I do believe they should be, you want to meet people halfway, and there are different, but also you don't want to get lost in a shuffle either. So it's this
Yeah,
interesting line.
but it's so important to have people on your team who can share their expertise and guidance
Yeah.
towards you too. But I mean, it's fascinating because, and I hope, and I'm sure through you sharing some of the ways that you're working, others who may have similar background as you, maybe if they're an author as well, or maybe not. Sometimes we can hear someone share something and think, how can I adapt it to my industry? I think that allows us to think deeper and wider. Never even thought that was, you know what I mean? Someone
Yeah.
shares something, you think, what's possible for me if I adapt that? So I think fantastic. Thank you for sharing
Oh, thank
those
you.
tips. And I'm sure people can reach out and find out more about your work. So
Yeah.
I'd love you to share what's the best way for people to connect, to find out more about the work that you're doing. How could they do that?
Absolutely. So the best place to find me is on my website, which is www.kristinalucia.com. And I have all my printables there. I have all this information, etc. Also, I always have a pop-up, and I do have an email list I do send things out to. That I do send things out to. I do send information out through. So I would love to have everyone on there, because in addition to what I've talked about, I also do workshops on how to write a children's book and whatnot. And I am looking to expand that in different ways. So, like, I always keep people posted of all those things, because I find as a creative, I I'm a combination of, I know usually you're one or the other, but I really do feel my business is growing to be a B2B, but also a B2C. And so I do talk to people who have different needs. And especially when I say I'm an author and artist, it's like saying you're a rock star. Like, I might as well have said I'm like Paul McCartney or something. It's like, oh my God, like, you do that. And so yeah, there's so many things.
Yeah. And I
I'm
know a lot
always
of
wanting to listen.
artists, they are so good at their craft, aren't they? But not necessarily the marketing. So I think it's a,
Yes.
unique combination
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do that, because you can create the best artwork, the best story. But if nobody knows about it, there could be 100,000 people who are waiting to hear that story and would love, in this case, a book, children's book, to have children to read that to their child. But if they don't know about you, they're not going to be able to find out about your book. So you've got to have the either be able to have the marketing nous yourself, or have a good team or a good coach that'll coach you through that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's
Well,
very
something I could share really fast is, so I was following this brand who does carry children's pajamas, and they actually are flagshipped here in New York. And so I physically went to the store, one of their locations. They have a couple locations here, among other areas of the U.S. Introduced myself, and got an email, sent the initial email, but then on IG, I'm doing it that way too, interacting. And so they posted the story, and they simply said, our buyers are getting ready for the show. And this is where I'm, for anyone listening, I promise you, I am trying to figure out like a solid strategy of how to do what I'm doing. Because some of this I'm doing, it just comes to me innately. And I'm like, how do I do this so I can explain it without people having to put the pieces together because I realized I
One,
apologize. I
two,
want to be so
1, 2,
clear.
and 3. Give it to me, your
Yeah,
framework.
exactly. Right. So I saw
Yeah.
a show and I was like, what show? And so I just Googled children's trade shows.
Mm.
And because it was Fashion Week here in NYC. And so I quickly Googled fashion shows, found these 2 children's fashion shows, signed up for a ticket. Literally, it was a week away. And I went to both shows and walked the floor with my books and pitched myself
Yeah.
and just started approaching brands. If I saw children's pajamas, if I saw twirly dresses, if I saw prints. And one brand that I'm actually networking with now, the owner said to me, good for you for being out here hustling. And
Yeah.
so that's part of it too. And I am trying to figure out a better way to explain this in like a more concrete fashion. So when I'm on shows like yours, I can better explain what I'm doing. But it is a lot. It's kind of like you don't want to wait for someone to hold your hand. You want to be acute and aware. And I realize it's easier said than done because I
Yeah.
do meet other authors and
You
artists
need
that aren't
courage and
trained.
boldness, don't you, to get out there and connect with
Yeah.
people, but you just don't, it's planting seeds, isn't it?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
planting seeds because someone might go from that trade show having heard you and may not have, and then all of a sudden someone says, we need to do something more innovative. And then you've mentioned something, hey, I've got an idea, and I think that that initial connection, you just don't know where it leads. And I read something, I don't know when it was, but I thought how true it is. So often we go and we do something and we expect or we would hope, and sometimes things come out immediately because we meet them at the right time, right place, and all of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
However, don't be put off where that the seeds that you plant now may not come to fruition down the track. It's the right timing will always be. And if we go and we do things without the expectation to get a deal right then and there, I think we
Yes.
would be more willing to go and do that. And you just don't know when those things will come to fruition, do
No,
you?
and it's ironic because that's what I've been saying. Like right now, I'm planting seeds.
Yeah.
And I was actually on a call today with a woman that I'm hoping to do a product collab with. And there's another woman that I'm already doing collabs with that I'm hoping to pull her in. And as I'm doing my follow-up emails, I said, I'm making sure I'm clarifying too, like this is the time to plant the seeds. And this is also too something else that I really want to hone in on in general and be able to brand what I do and be able to like share it more concretely. But I do see a January through June as planting seeds because I am as an artist, as an author, I am in a heavily merchandise goods driven business where a good part of my business is that. So July through December, that's the time that the machine needs to be running. I need to be people's heads in order to move forward. And so basically my point of my tangent is that, we're talking about these collabs and I am manufacturing Bella right now. I drew out this thing as an artist. Again, as an artist, like I drew out the tech drawing. I said exactly what I want because I do crocheter. But obviously,
Mm.
when you're doing stuffy, it does adjust the design a little bit. But I wanted it as true as possible is why I created. So I drew this drawing, got her. And, so I'm following up with everything for timeline. And I said, if we put the stuffy in this collab, let's do it for Christmas only because
Yeah.
Christmas is the biggest holiday that people buy for, but also adding a stuffy is going to shift the size of the box. And it could
Mm.
also mean that, for example, like I need to be the shipping center, not one of the other ladies, because the books I can order from the printer and have them shipped to whoever. Whereas the
Yes.
stuffies, it may not be effective for me to ship them to one of the ladies, but also even aside from that, we need to get a bigger box. So
Mm.
there it's a bigger cost. And also there is more planning because November 1st is a big drop. And that's
Yeah.
also part of when I say I do my daily interaction, daily market research. That's also how I solidified, okay, after 4th of July, Halloween takes over. November 1st, complete Christmas. It's just
Mm.
like Christmas nonstop. And so those are things too when you're developing your marketing strategies is being, and every market's different, and being aware of your market drops, being aware of your busy season. Because when you're aware of your busy season, as you so beautifully said, when to plant seeds. You
Mm.
know when to approach your power partners. Because if I approach a store in December, even
Oh,
November, They're like, no, go away, go away.
We haven't even got time for a conversation with our team. We're just full steam. It's so, I mean, this is one of the things that I want to focus on as well. So maybe get you back once you've had a number of these collaborations. I think moving forward, it's the collaborations that really are going to solidify a lot of the business opportunities, because especially for women, there's something about collaborations that many women, not all, but many seem not want to do because, I don't want to share my IP, or I'm scared someone will steal my ideas and stuff. But if we all walk in the zone and what I call our gifts and talents that the Lord has blessed us with, and we just do well in those and then collaborate with others who are also talented and gifted in other areas, we can work so much better than on our own, because we can't possibly do everything. And I think collaborations just allow, and they're fun. When you partner with the right people, they really can be fun and supportive, because there's like-minded people who you can, speak with. And I think collaborations are certainly a key strategy moving forward. They always have been, haven't they? They've always been that. But from what I'm hearing, a lot of women in business tend to be a little bit averse to collaborations. So.
Well, because two of my favorite movies, it's like a good way to give an example of this, because that's what I'm working on right now too, is my power partnerships. That's what, collaborations, and there are certain collaborations which I consider more power partnerships, meaning I'm aligning myself with women that have master's in education, that are not only mothers, but have been teaching for years and have the degrees to back it up. Or, like one of the women that I do work with right now in the collaboration, she creates like the wooden inserts, like, people that are focused on the same audience, but they create something that I can't offer. The best way I can describe it is I personally love the Ocean's movies, and I love sneakers, and I'm a huge George Clooney and I guess I'm Robert Redford fan. And when you watch those ensemble movies, and you look at the Ocean's 11, or you look at Sneakers, George Clooney and Robert Redford, they're not the strongest ones. Like the Sidney Poitier or the Brad Pitt, they're stronger, but it's that awareness of knowing when to listen. And Sidney Poitier does it so beautiful in Sneakers, because there's this one scene where the others are playing with this like computer chip in it, and Sidney Poitier's character saying, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." He's like the law enforcer. He's like the dad of the group. But Robert Redford knows when to stop and listen. And as a whole, they're so strong because they work together and they respect each other. And even in the Ocean's movies, we see that. And so that's really, as an entrepreneur, that's what I'm emulating when I work with these women, is like, what is your audience looking for? What are you looking for your brand? What are you thinking about? Because I am talking with this other woman who does gatherings with sensory bins and other activities, whatnot. And she has a master's education. She was a kindergarten teacher for over a decade, as a mom of 3. And that's what I said to her too, as I said, can we co-create a worksheet? So, because I can draw and design it, but from an educator point of view, I'm curious, what would you want to see on this worksheet? Why do you want to see that? And that's how we really grow, is by opening our mind. And so that's why I bring up those movies, because if you go back and watch them, you realize that's what those characters are doing.
Yeah. Kristina, I have loved this conversation. In fact, I got so immersed, I realized that I have another interview starting.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
So I'm just going to say thank you so much for sharing. This is live across all of the platforms, of course. And so please reach out to Kristina. Love this conversation, and I'm sure we will continue it sometime in the future. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's Anne-Marie. Before I go, are you a coach or a consultant who feels like the world's best kept secret? Your experience is vast, yet secretly you're frustrated because despite all of your hard work, you're just not getting the visibility, leads, or new clients you'd hope for, and you don't know why? I've created free training and resources that'll help you build visibility, generate leads, and enroll dream clients with ease, because you're seen as a trusted authority, even in a crowded market. marketplace, and you've positioned yourself as the choice versus just a choice with your unique, uncopyable, and unforgettable brand and message. And you're able to nurture listeners into leads from your podcast, even from your first episode. To access these free resources, go to ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community. That's ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community.